Vitaly, I'm Vitaly Portnikov. Today is, in principle, a difficult day from the point of view of the fact that you happen to be with the so-called polar plan of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and everyone who has been given a Coke. You know, even today, the President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, in London, diluted the situation with the European leader, the Prime Minister in the UK, Keir Starmer, and the gentleman of the summit with the Federal Chancellor of Mekina, Friedrich Merz, and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. We can say that the prices are just students. It is not in the lower powers of Europe, and the European part of NATO, and the European Union, that France is not in decline. Ukraine's allies in Western Europe are important today, in the center of Europe. Such an ally is overestimated extremely by the main Polish republics. Standing obvious what is overgrown, you drop out of the network with the European leader and continue what London has brought down to Brussels on the hearth of the European Commission, the European Rada of Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Koch. You know, even for the Prot, I will look like the finance of Ukraine on the offensive 2026 Rick. Allegedly will help the Ukrainian budget. European Ukraine is not a simple torture. Let's also say Ursula von der Leyen is so inveterate about the Hillnitsa and the so-called corporate loan. And in London, Vladimir Zelensky met with Emmanuel Macron, for example, whose Ukraine is both about a reportative loan, and such a member needs shukadi. I will look, and this whole situation is what she has. I want to say buckets more on my dumka, overgrown. Standing absolutely obvious on the faces of oysters with Europeans, and on the other oysters in the hall. Even in the hall, Americans really adore the sight of the Ukrainian president. The Europeans themselves are joking for the kind of American longing for Ukraine, tied that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, our president, wants to get a so-called mayor in Ukraine. Although not as a sign that what Russia wants to get is not Maya. And the key to this mayor, from Trump's point of view, is the conclusions of non-Ukrainian troops outside the territory of the Donetsk region of Ukraine. Vladimir Zelensky today publicly kind of said that the Americans are pushing a compromise from territorial torture. To compromise is not Maya. And so again, let's look at the situation realistically. That Trump so poliga on the findings of the Ukrainian Donbass. The fact that the wedding of Putin, Yaki that all Razmev proms, may be Tilka after the Ukrainian army, here that often on the territory of the Donetsk region. Khazara is under our control. And the Americans are actually overgrown with bees, everything says both Russian and narrative. Well, Ukraine is all in spending the entire territory. So what's the problem with what are we in? Donbass. I think there was one test to be negotiated on Zustrichi with the European leader. And you and I will put another torture. Important on the summit, on the faces you moss. And why did Putin get involved? Yaki Tilly Putin. Chiputin made up for the guilt. In truth, he needs a truce for Kramatorsk-Slavyansk. Not Putin to think, I still want to post. Yaki accompany his so-called skin special operation. You wanted the Ukrainian army to take over the territory of the Donetsk region of Donetsk. Yak, in principle, my production situation is in the dead of cut, yak, let's tell him Pascu. And there was the annexation of Crimea. What Putin is for is an absolutely calm moment with a sonorous post-Radian scenario on the Crimea. The Crimea is an independent republic. These republics are known to be independent, and they are not recognized. And with such a rank, the serious destabilization of Ukraine itself in the Russian-Ukrainian courts is richly serious destabilization of the internal Ukrainian conflict from the point of view of Crimea. Nothing has changed as a result of the annexation. Because she was in politics, it turned out from Russia, and Crimea was turned, so that she was between and Crimea. Allegedly she was between Moldova and Transnistria. And what happened between Georgia and Abkhazia, Ossetia, Georgia? As a result, Russia caused the independence of Abkhazia and Ossetia. We can't make Putin angry. Why is it not because Putin is there? Though I will swim in, but here they will not come out in the Def directory and Ukraine. And put it both the Russian and the Russian people and their allies. The situation is about clear. I will cut out the problem of Crimea for us and claim Ukraine. I won't be Ukraine, I won't be a problem. And you've been sprinkling all the pasta on all the Russian politicians. After all, those who served Putin, before those who were in opposition to Putin, and now say that Crimea is a pasty place for sandwiches. Coming to Crimea. Cut for the two peoples to Saviti. And I'm still before the Crimea, still Dodostov territory. Then this word is tried on 3 times. TPPR offensive torture. For discounts to Putin in Zagoli, it is necessary that the Ukrainian troops simply withdraw from the Crimea. No need. They are perfectly aware that the Ukrainian troops will simply withdraw from the Crimea. That is, I ask Donbass, then I will mean, and just the situation is like a beer wife. Ours won't be the fault. I'm guessing right now, Russia was not that it bought the Kaliningrad region for 3 times. Before 1975th lesson. It was not Masuma European cordons. Tilki Helsinki Act Poklov Edge with a hellish alliance about a superpower with a nuclear dump. And she was sure that no one would be interested in this territory. And not. So it is here. Just primates Donbass Kherson and Zaporizhzhia region without knowledge. It just means opening another tiger on the neck of the Russian economy and broken sanctions. So Russia, in order for it to be able to really use territories, and you need hired territories, including Ukraine and the entrance. And Russia, the process with Trump is not just going to wash you out. The fact that are Ukrainians and Europeans. Torment, and can we get in trouble? Well, today he says that not from the point of view of Ukrainian legislation, but not from the point of view of international law, and not from the point of view of morality. Well, I know, so I'm not going to discuss the moral context about politics. Morals, as a rule, follow the tasks of the moment. Not all decisions in politics are morally behind everything. International law is absolutely, to Ukrainians to replace the territory. One Ukraine with the fact that frequent on the territory. In international law, 100,000 were served. Can there be 100,000 Ukraine, let's say, and also Crimea, Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye regions are regions of Russia, not Ukraine, and in the behavior of the snake before the legislation. Well, the Western powers themselves were enough for Serbia to cause the independence of the Kosovo Cabal, its autonomous region. Serbia is not elected, and no one can and will mean treason of the constitutional territories of Serbia itself. I'll notify you. From the point of view of Ukrainian legislation, they could not be practical. And let's look at the situation realistically. Firm our backs are to the wall, and we decided that we yak legally. Well, the Ukrainian constitution is not holding a referendum on territorial integrity. It's just that we have me in the constitution of the Russian Federation. We are a unitary power, the Russian Federation, the federal power. The Russian Federation is not output to the subject. For the storage of the Russian Federation, for themselves bookmarks to obgavervaja such tests you can on the ladder. And referring to the article of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. And Tilky, nothing else. I can tell you from an hour of Kola's Chechen guilt, it was absolutely obvious that Russians and Chechens do not respect reason. I Propanuvav the famous Russian constitution, so that it allowed to cut out the Chechen problem without the temple rats. I propane praise equestrian law about the possible shutdown of the subject from the warehouse of the Russian Federation. And Pownum change to the constitution of the Russian Federation. Holding a referendum on the territory of the subject and with the test. The subject is invited to leave the warehouse of the Russian Federation. A referendum on the territory of the Russian Federation. Test Chayador Hamadani of the Russian Federation. Turned off. Subjects for warehouses of the Russian Federation. I would like the referendum to end with the laudable result of, say, the elections of elections, both in the Chechen Republic and throughout the territory of the Russian Federation. Vote for off the subject due to stock status of the Russian Federation. The Chechen Republic is turned off in the warehouses of the Russian Federation. You know the mortgaged power, and then I already know an extremely fallow power of some importance. You are no longer showing scandals in the ring, and even before that text. The whole of Russia, the whole was called as Radnik, but Tilky are not Russians, maybe Russians have such imaginative ideas. And I, of course, from the point of view of the constitution of the Russian Federation, Chechnya Nikola's not square. And Russia is still a test of territorial integrity. I will also produce those guilt until the collapse of the most hopeful for Russian democracy. Food can be deduced in the constitution. So it is here. Ukraine had enough of its territories occupied by Russia, and the whole occupation is legitimate. Necessary treasons in the constitution. Turn off the regions from the warehouse of Ukraine. And treason in the constitution. Holding a referendum, even before the shutdown, in the region outside of Ukraine. And I do not know what the referendum drive is for the People's Chinese Drive articles. And it is obvious that the torture of constitutionalsmen. The Verkhovna Rada of Maya praises these snakes with the shlyak of 2 different sessions. Allegedly, you mark, these snakes seem to be hardened by the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. And Tilky the Verkhovna Rada may not conduct treason before the Constitution. That's just a fuck and discounts for an hour. And Tilky can hold a referendum. Moreover, it is absolutely obvious that the next referendum on the territory of Ukraine, both it is controlled, and on the territory of those regions, is about switching off, so that the thinking of their population about them is not turned off. Well, let's say, because we see the situation with the region, and we will respect that we cannot hold a referendum there, but so. And everything is the same, a referendum, and with the results of the population of Ukraine voting for the shutdown of, say, the Autonomous Republic of Crimea to Sevastopol, the Donetsk of the Luhansk, Kherson and Paris regions of Ukraine, the warehouses of Ukraine. It is necessary about 2 sessions of the Verkhovna Rada, and a prominent constitutional court. TP just gunpowder discounts for an hour loans. And again, Tilka is not up to it. I will end up with a military idea, there will be a cashed-up military camp, and for the cob. It is necessary that the Ukrainian parliament will be in the mode of not military standing, but of different sessions. And it is absolutely obvious that the current warehouse of the Ukrainian parliament will not be scooped out. And continue Tilky with a military camp. The Verkhovna Rada will simply have to recognize the parliament in the parliamentary elections, and their elections will be removed. The skin of you, who of course, on constitutional law, of course, is also about the Rocky Sprat. What Ukraine is like with a similar scheme. I still have Ukraine with a similar scheme. I also know the deputies in consultation for the laws about the referendum. I still know this court her article in the unitary state. I still know that the Hromadians of Ukraine will vote for the shutdown of the territory from the warehouse of Ukraine. I still know a decision is being implemented with deputies, and you also know that a decision is being implemented from constitutional judges. You are in the hall, of course, also so that before the skin deputy, the skin judge, and the skin whopper, I will put a machine gun on my brother and the fate of the lost vote. Then my bottle, the National Guard of the Russian Federation. And ticks in Parliament, and the elector of votes of Pitany. And Vladimir Putin knows that the behavior graduate faculty of St. Petersburg University. So, it is extremely possible to guide a pseudo-retinue. Sweet institute named after Yuri Andropov. I'm ready for the Maybit of the Chekists. It is important for Putin to read all the expert not Davidki with the drive of that, yak can be that crock from the gum. And led by his so-called legitimism. Important. You are all crocs and look and legit. Well, they didn't just take it and say I'm coming to Crimea. There was a body procedure and a pseudo-referendum and the decision of the Verkhovna Rada of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea Hello. The independent state and the visible exhibitions of the Constitutional Court of the Russian Federation High. Having seen all the articles in the Constitution, the court in such a rank, taking on the visible for the interpretation of the Constitution of Russia, in principle, on the territory of Ukraine alone, catches the decision of federal fees in the Russian Federation. As you know, the missile defense system has entered Ukrainian territory. Putin tested the views in the upper house of the Russian Parliament of the Federation Council, knowing them well about parliamentarism. Then you can test, but for what? And in order to hake it. Let's turn the houses and theses. He absolutely does not need any kind of completion of guilt. He needs me to demonstrate to both Russians and Americans. It is not yet the alleged completion of Ukraine with a political map of the retinue, and I will not sleep. The fact that Ukraine I will claim these territories, Yaki and she purchased. Russia, Ukraine. You can say so eat covered up in Finland. Well, it is extremely difficult to enter the territories of the Dvichi. And suddenly in the inheritance, in fact, up to a part, in another light of guilt. And on the Tilka for the Russian Federation of Ukraine and an ally of Britain. And this is international law in this sense. These ambushes of Finland look completely different from the Ukrainian ones. You chat these solutions. Nike Finland, with the transfer of its territories to the Radio Union. I think that they in the right with could be absolutely we are with you torturing the view of the territory of Russia. It is absolutely obvious that the explosions in the fire along the line actually mean the removal of Russia's control over those Ukrainian territories. Let there be Russian troops. I basically was. And I repeat, Russia has such options that you are still a suspended conflict there. I will mean that Russia cannot invest in the occupied territories, that it cannot open them, that it can withdraw everything. And the halls that are empty there. That's what Putin wants, and the blind and the cut. Once. Pot and absolutely, I will inform you about the destabilization of the situation in Ukraine. Really? For today. So is the format of the strongest mood. And it can go away from another year. To the Ukrainian people with the transfer of territory voluntarily. A serious blow to I would say not you, but also Ukrainian from such a transfer. And Ukrainians with not, and create a real atmosphere of Hromadian guilt and misunderstanding between Hromadian and Ukraine and Vlad. And in theory, Putin's main task is falling into the topic with Trump. No, that Putin would want all propositions, and Trump's main objective is to demonstrate the constructive Ukraine and Europe. The robot is also overgrown with Putin. And the Americans are helping us. That we are practically profs with the Russians and catch all the tilky healthy glust. The exit of the Ukrainian army from the Donetsk region, neutral Ukraine, the Russian move, the Russian church, Sasha. That a rocket fell before you, right? And he doesn't want to, so he wants to continue the guilt. Well, what does it mean? He wants to, so high is fighting. What can forget the marrow of all parts of the people, FIFA World Prize winner Donald Tam? Yak having said today, the ambassador from the United States to NATO, Pan and Tucker, and I, in principle, are with the Kilnik of Ukraine. The whole story. I'm still Trump on Batchet, yet Ukrainians do not adore. And the Russians don't adore the mayor, then Trump will just get out of the situation. I'm not going to study in regulation anymore. Well, stick her territorial, I would say, gibberish. The warranty test is overstated, and for me again, it is overstated to marvelous. I'm already talking about the process, and you are not passing on the skin ether one time. That's the president's European guarantees out, and clear Europeans are ready in the rada of repeated aggression of Russia. Of course, we are now going to discuss the test of Russia's repeated aggression, seen in Ukraine with us on the concepts of cola yak wine. And why are we from the Baki of Russian political scientists? The guilt is similar to the guilt of the 17th-18th old man Russia Peter, there is a beer wine 30 Rocky happened. What can be said about the lasting guilt of the conflict? With what rank do we get from the fact that all the guilt did not pretend to be on the 30th? That the installation of the Russian yak on speak about repeated guilt, and that you understand real tools. On speak about it is visible in Ukraine of a skin day, and Russia has a clear program, and I am not far away, of course. Savnaya speech. And it is evident that the partners can't say I'm willing to make. There is also a clear installation for all partners received in the state. They will not fight for a nuclear power and for their pegged chastas and imperial territory. He wants the arena of nuclear guilt and the existence of a strategic and tactful nuclear dump, and forgotten by tens of millions of people. Krabko, we don't know that the United States is ready to fight for Europe. We don't know we're ready. Zahid Europeans and Americans merit, Poland. And the Baltic Ukraine is irrational. Once again, the American administration, we will be able to test it in the 29th kind of 2000. And for today, the warranty was issued by the obvious. And you know that we are talking about these guarantees about not donut stupas, and for those Ukrainian politicians. It was the Ukrainian political forces that were Euro-Atlantically patched up, and I can't say at once not absolutely. I do not know and no one knows. So in the dark plan, it's not like I'm going to look like a mind. And I can tell you, I have a serious way to destabilize the Ukrainian, and my Sprat axioms to say. Persh's axiom. There are no real soap today. And I adore Ukraine for the explosion of an obscure peace process. President Putin has a clear and obvious adoration to continue and blame against Ukraine as long as he has pennies, and will get 4 people who are ready to be married for pennies. And I will be opposed to the fishing complex of the Russian Federation. Putin is not fighting for territory. Vin is fighting for the fact that the territory of Ukraine was bent by Russia. Yet there was the territory of the Russian Federation. It is not possible for us to do this through Putin's alleged territorial handouts. Until then, fuck it, he has the strength to blame. Absolutely reality. And the reality is we are not giving up in Europe. We are talking about missile defense. The situation is even formed in the fault of Russia against Ukraine. Absolutely, you do not pass for the skin, the speech began to understand. Still so, in principle it happens. And I want to tell you buckets that in the holy we are talking about missile defense, so in the dark plan, in principle. We are overgrown with discounts, we are in a difficult situation, I am developing into a Russian-Ukrainian. And then they test me for it. So well, I feel a million times. So what do we have in the cotton wool chapter? Well, again, so I want the mind to have a fairly simple speech. No one is waiting for our surrender. Capitulation works. Cola, you come out with a white ensign and says, and we are ready. The territories of 4 regions, 5 regions, 7 regions have been submitted to you. Are you ready? Ring our constitution. Voices of the Russian sovereign, and live with you in the city hall, and love. Not the Russian roar of the rosary sent, that you overestimate the Ukrainian power in the booth Krizevi moment. The whole Ukrainian power just I'd prot TB, and ruinous all your imperial plans. Von and met in 1918th kind, in 1990 Persh is not naive. And the counselor also missed a third of this very washing. Not like the Ukrainian capitulation is not, of course. Ukraine will be cleansed, Ukrainians. In different ways. Ukrainians will also defend their Ukrainian identity. They will be kicked out of existence. Ukrainians will be ready for the weather. That is, all the more so because we speak the same language, that Russian passports will be issued there. And will be sent to the Novobudovi far gatherings and Siberia. Their whole empire was already sending something new. You don't know yet who the Tumen region of Amur is formed from, but the future of sprat of such areas. Maybe there's the so-called Kiev-Kharkiv in the new fistulas. There will be no Ukraine there either, there will just be Russia kicked out. From whom that much to squeeze out it all will go. Not to Novosibirsk. And on the topic all terminates. That is the history of the Ukrainian people. On the Ukrainian air defense systems, thousands of millions of people can emigrate there from the brigade in memory of Ukrainians. I am now. I don't know anything about the future of the Jewish campaign, I hesitated. Maybe share with you the Bogama episode and your national historical memory. What you have understood, I will look like. Kola, you meet your power, how is it in TB Beulah? You will pretend to be a man without an anchor for 1,000, without a house, without an anchor, without a fulcrum and a bucket. Of course, millions of Ukrainians of Zara are beyond the cordon of our Ukraine. Buckets through to beat one right Hromadyan Ukraine is fighting and ready. The moment is perceived, and on the right you are none of you me. Well, such Jews can be rich again. Yes, emigrants from the Russian Empire. I practically lived for Nansen's passports could not travel from one European Ukraine. And so he lived. People of Lyudman. Really the price of torture, not the peace process. And in the form of the Ukrainian people of the Buddha and the Ukrainian state. I do not know in which territories. I do not know anything about demographic ambushes, and no one can be overgrown. The torture to the history in plain sight here is like a Russian desert. From always drunk. And indeed, in the whole situation, they are important in Europe. Indeed, the whole situation is important for the Nechet of the dialogue Zakin, and the one who is gaining on God. And the criminality of their president and administration. And it is also important for Americans and the electorate about the party, so as not to fall into a fool. Even Trump and he were honed less by the American people. So I made my way to Vlada too, it often happens. And not in their glances at Ukraine, and the mirrors look absolutely less. So it was less with people. Spoiling there is Joseph Kennedy. Senior. I'm all over Hitler. Nikola was not of the American people, then mark the American people in our experience. And need people to take on our big past their president. When the selective company starts. I'm taking you to our big. On a date chance. And yet, of course, you come to the conclusion that the soap process is in the process. I'll give you some more ether. I will be on personal days asking you to subscribe to the channel, who are not subscribed to the airwaves. To the fact that we are with you and the Demon Channel Millions has ended David Bilsha 9000. And I will also give you thousands more in Diagno. And with this rank, we are with you at once from the channel a million. They will be glad to have such a Hanukkah and rich. TPPR. I want to ask you to set the subshells of the ether. You know, it's bigger, it's light, it's rich with your likes and your comments, and about what you think about the situation. You can really and choke on the tools and the channel. TPPR tell him how important and beneficial for Pitnew came ether. About demographically high in Russia, you are still Ukrainians, the Russian passport of Russians looked at the front. I'm talking about demographically evicting Russia. I'm not on the was Russian peoples. But people are ready to fight in the dropped forces of the Russian Federation. I am a mobilization resource on the was. The torture of Ukrainians with Russian passports, and of course, the significance and the simple reason that Russian passports. People are in the occupied territories, these passports have no sense. And these territories will also be those people who will stop Russian hail. I'm already going to punish another torture in that, discounts there, discounts did not tear off, discounts looked and did not look. You don't even know that you don't know discounts on the truth. Russians have looked at the front. Ukrainians have Russian passports, and so many people want to fight in the dropped forces of the Russian Federation. In themselves, and are ready to fight, and it would be nice to get. And he loved to fight and for free. There was no need for the entire contract army, in fact the Naaman army, and there was no need to be afraid of mass mobilization. You perfectly don't you rent summarized. There is. Putin also knows not to press. I will also accept that his civilization has a mass past in mobilization. But there were no fewer people to fight. There it ends, and the pennies end up on them, in the rich subjects of the Russian Federation. They add surcharges to the federal payment contract. The whole economic situation is just not real. What's more, mobilization reserves of Russia, I'm not the reality Sklony, of course. Donald Trump DPI election, with getting the state irrevocably. We won't be able to. In order to get the state irrevocably, such a far-right politician Donald Trump needs to establish a dictatorship. Even in a difficult situation, the ultra-right of politics passed before the Vlad, as a rule, established a dictatorship. And the parliament dispersed it simply on the declaration. So it was with Adolf Hitler, so it was with Mussolini, so it was with Vladimir Putin, so it happened with the dictator. And Latin American Ukraine. Trump. Trump absolutely clearly agrees with the facts of the foundation of electoral democracy. The American Congress cannot accept the budget for 2026 RIC, because on exuding a voice and you can accept it and reason with a Democrat. In order to cement Vlad, the ultra-right regime needs not just to disperse the parliaments, but called the people of rights. Can't get it. The road of totalitarianism is not totalitarianism itself, authoritarianism. And in order to make an authoritarian regime become totalitarian, full vlasnem need wine. Until Wednesday, Hitler and Mussolini and Putin and the Argentine faux junta. It was understood that it was not yet possible to get a Coke just taken in a fist. She began to blame for the Ukrainian islands. Lost. All the logic. Trump is the peacemaker of the Nobel Prize mayor on the ideology of the magician. And that schizophrenia. The far-right organization is the birthplace of the far-right organization. My ultra-right ideology itself will be tied up with the willingness to throw this to millions of people with a hail of poison. For the promise of a totalitarian regime. But still symbiotic and four seams, don't you think? The fact that Nicola is not about Americans voting for the abduction of wet, and you have already rated Trump, and the most Republicans of the designated election. Ratings are basically about what Republicans can do with politics, and with a job received in the state in the 2026, in the 2029 kind. I don't want to take it forever. A strong party and a winner. More precisely, it is rich that the European Union can still forget about your thinking for the imperious. And our savings at times Trump is still on the European continent. The truth of the European Union is rich. Why do Putin and Trump want to break up the European Union in Zagoli? The fact that it is richly easier with a skin cream and power mats on the right and wrapped on it. The skin cream of the power on the competitor with the received staff on the Russian Federation on the skin. European power itself is a competitor. That's right. But the European Union itself in real competitive with respect to all piled in the U. There are such reports for Brexit both in Washington and in Moscow. We will always be stuck with an adventurer like Nigel Farage, J. Boris Johnson, in the fact that he is from Britain. And a real swim in Europe. It's lucky that the warmth is overgrown, and we are still washing the populace and adventurers just deceived the British. You will be right. Buckets. And why am I doing this to the bastards? To the fact that in those situations, you and I, of course, the European Union needs an effective mechanism for its current testing. There will be a mechanism. The European Union does not get people, it does not get resources, it does not get military forces, it does not get intelligence. In order to confront Russia on American Petrograd, which is just the weather for another hour. When the American states have the ultra-right power, it is necessary to think about your own independent roses so you can turn it to Euro-Atlantic integration with America. Then Vlad's power to act wildly. I still have to tell all the European Union to demand a hearing in this yaki of the politics of Europe, and the report of the authorities for the politicals men both in America and in Russia. Americans have ceased, and as if the vanguard of democracies, that is, according to the American evil, and as if united on Europe. And for a united Europe by the continent of Orban, and on the continent of Macron. Scholz, Macron, Merz and Starm. That's it. Merz, dating rating. I'm like there are threats for us here. Well, the mayor is meeting with the rating, not from our point of view, but from the point of view of those internal political problems. And with the federal. I'll tell you buckets, that's the order. I'm adding it up from Christian democracy to social democracy. I am today, and the problem for the rating of the federal chancellor is on the truth in the massacre of the sides. And they are sleeping at once, in order to prevent Vlad from saying that the alternative is early at a time. And I am not turning off for a new coalition. After the upcoming elections in Tikka, the Social Democrats will already be chancellor. What do you propose? Allegedly a way out of the situation, even before being received in the state. I respect that there is not yet an alleged way out of the situation in the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. It is still being seriously said. In general, flooded in May. Firm the 24th fierce 2022 hand, and May has no way out. Nobody wants to tell people honestly. And Maya is just a road to the opera of Russia, and with Podavany still Kalisno in the date. She will push out and arm the forces and squeezed out. And there may be a need for, so we need Trump to live there, and the dialogue is overgrown with Americans. With the brigade of theirs, and not to praise the decisions, and will produce up to internal destabilization in our Ukraine. But something doesn't make sense. And it's not the most I'm going to tell you now that we need effective powers. One can see the inefficient management of the state, and when hiring for a nationally solidary class received in the states, that there are not those who are ready for such decisions. Pitney, because we are a platoon of this situation, to the position here is not wow, who are ready to surrender to Pesebna minds. That's it. Oh. You can join the Russian Federation is still so filthy. You have just joined the Russian Federation the day before last. All sorts of not all of your wants to join the Russian Federation, then focus. You still want to join the Russian Federation here. Suitcase, railway station of Russia. What's the problem? Do you have a stream? You yourself are still Ukrainians, Russian passports. There were people here. It was enough as if Russia were frequent. Respected Ukraine unclear. And I respect still honest from the point of view of these people, it would be zebra and Monotki and drive to Russia. And what do you not think of Ukraine? It is necessary here for what you want Russia and Bach to be here, and Russia and Maya are also here. It also takes away speech. Pack up and goodbye. You go far into the beautiful. So you damn territories think you can pit. And Tesh doesn't want anything for the body. And I want a Russian soldier to come and grab the entire territory of the purchase from you. Yours is clearly not about happiness. But we are no longer just golden, maybe then just shoot him so that they don't give him a claim. At the temple prosecutor's office. I'm a problem in it before Russia. So Maria is about what pays you off, it does not ground on your understanding, and I do not give up absolutely at once. Ya explained the European ranks and their choice in the range in Ukraine at one time. Our budget allocates 9 billion for the road. In our budget, it allocates 9 billion for the road to the budget, and in the budget. And we've had enough mats, I'm essentially twisting the Central Lords. That we can, as if it can be effectively. So the people themselves voted for him. That's it, and I will be and dear. Gifts are paid to businesses, including in the hotel resort areas. Hotels pay gifts to the Ukrainian budget, gifts to the budget, and there would be no Ukrainian army. And all Europeans know perfectly well that I am the national budget and the budget. And I explained it simply. Ukraine is still in the PD, Russian soldiers are beating your cordon, and you will need to think. And do not sell billions for the road of Dubakov, and you have your squads for the funeral, your invaders, your donkey baths. I want you for the funeral, and a penny for the funeral. No problem. The funeral will be on the highest level. You can experience the Germans have another light of guilt, and the Poles. At Horty's in the 56th lesson, you can tell him about the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And they will tell him everything in the open work. So explain yourself, just take a closer look at the place. Well, you're going to be tied up in a fight that just fire drones, you hear, in a wet place. I'm already so far away. Do not need to unpack the helmets that you are helping Ukraine, and she is your uncle. And so out of power to the Hromadians. We give these that you are overpriced alive. And Ukraine is fighting, you have a chance to survive and reset. If we had overgrown, we could fight with the dropped drones and the Russian army. We will just continue your life. Here's 25 Rocky can live up to 35. You want to live up to 35, don't you? And that we are kind in Ukraine, so help it, then you can fill up to old age to live. And if we stop helping, and say there is corruption on the road, then you live, and the substance of the beautiful cross. On the spot, yes, from the battlefield. That's how you need to dilute it. I'm with tomorrow's dead man, and I demand to dilute out of joy, then you can vote for the election still alive. And explain in this choice who else will come and say, oh, so vote for replacements, I'm with Putin, and everything will be in TB. Show me the current president of Ukraine. I am already befitting the topic of choice. I am the hero of the support, and will make another wish with Putin, and with Putin, the European has an American choice for illusions. For sacrifice. Out and with offense help. Including in the Czech Republic. The Czech Republic is already crumpled, and in the 38th lesson, it fell off the political map of the retinue would not have been there. 68 So the Russian troops Radinsky came to the past. It was essentially the Russians who swatted all of her freedom. Who am I going to? Hi. There is no question with your participants, friends, and on the spot Yana Palika, slept in praise, and you all want to experience here. And who wants for? Not so with love. Well, you're on your lad Rocky and you think Steam Rocky will fight, and therefore the Czech Republic to serve. And often on what front for you think anyone? And let's say, oh, and 9 billion for the road to the beaches. Well, that's fine, drive along the road, resting booze with us, so that we can have an army. And that we are such a miracle road for you. And guilt deal with Ukrainian corruption. You will be asking your politicians what we are doing directly from Ukraine, and the offense to the European Union. Not such corruption, maybe it was necessary. Corruption for the living. The dead don't give a shit. To captivate is not giving up, it's just such intelligent nego. And then I kept thinking that we were sacrificing, when I told the Ukrainians that I was paying a check for millions of refugees. Oh my God, dear Portnikov, and my God, we have a concept of the 95th quarter here. What are we? All the bullshit of hearing. Well, don't listen, laugh. Those not their own humorists, here's a rich one out and votes for homo. You vote for fascists. The post of fascists, and I will correct the coalition. Well, that's good. I'm still on Hyde. By Willie. And don't forget about inheritances. Oh, we don't know it's that simple. In now, explain all this 155,000 times. Well, here we have the same monsters of Trump to speak and talk about the fact that for the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. Literally in those we are diluting with you, and a new speech of the president has begun. In the state received more. That we just went. In Europe, it is merged, and we want from Europe such a Europe to collapse into the Hibney strained. We don't want Europe to change so much. Biden will repeat Trump. Yes, there are $350 billion in Ukraine. Do you know what else I'm pushing? Nothing. Oh, narest. But I'm pushing Jewel on the Cob. Won and visited and tanks. Well, Bachata Nart appears. A Freudian reservation is declared from Trump. Shouting that my 150,000 times to my uncle, then it appears that nothing is wrong in Ukraine. It was also required, in principle, until spring. Everything is fine here, a wonderful phrase, and needs a golden leader and a chisel. And you know, I haven't given them anything yet. Well. On those beautiful phrases of the president from the received in the state. I think we're live, we're diluting. I think that all these stories we before plans for him, poveromo test finansowania Ukraine will turn off. About the situation. We can be extremely ironic with this moment. The situation for the warehouse. This is a fact. And even on the feet, the days will not show in what straight line. Daikuyu? I'm still on the air today. I ask you to broadcast and subscribe to the channel by writing. I want to tell you more. We are with you, and the demo on the million channel, and actually 9,000 to a million have ended. And this is such, I would say, serious for me. The knowledge that you and I are diluting seriously journalists can end serious with them, and richly can be rich. Shlyak to our miracle power and our Ukraine media space. What are you seriously talking about, and honestly talking, and presumptuously talking? Well, then. So right, put it appropriately. To the comment, you also think with the help of the rose of the situation, I will also be in the diaknia for you. And I will be in diaknia to those who, as a tool and through this channel, yak and extremely on myself. I am someone helping the Ukrainian army as the main guarantor of our savings.